Hello, Game Gear Girl here, and welcome to another episode. In this episode, we're going to talk about hobby hints for the retro gaming enthusiast. So I'm going to have 5 tips here that I think are pretty useful when you get into kind of retro gaming as a hobby. So why don't we start with number 5. So hint number 5 is getting to know your local retro gaming staff. So whether these are the employees or hopefully the owners if that's possible. Why I say this is that if you go and you frequent a store, chances are that they're going to get to know you, they're going to get to know the types of things you like, and yes, they can put stuff aside for you if they think you're going to like it, but more importantly, they can give you free stuff. I've received quite a few different free things from one particular local gaming store that I frequent. So let's talk about that. One of the first things that they gave me free is just Game Gear cases. So just empty cases for Game Gear games. Now these come in handy, obviously, for when you store Game Gear games, because of the shape of the game, it can be really frustrating if you try and stack them when they are not in their cases. And this makes it very easy to stack, store, and then actually keep your games quite clean and safe. So this is one of the items that I got free from retro gaming stores. So let's take a look at another item. Something else that I managed to get free from a gaming store, the same gaming store, is not this game, but the case for it. So we were talking about my collection, and I said that I had RoboCop vs. the Terminator for Genesis, just a loose copy. And they had actually just received a whole bunch of Genesis stuff in, and they actually had the box and manual for it, but the game didn't work. The game was a dud. So they tried everything they could, they cleaned it, whatever, and it didn't work. So they just gave this to me in really nice shape as well, very clean, and that is something that I also got for free. So now I can add that to my box collection, which obviously looks a lot nicer on the shelf, and look at that there. Another thing I got free from a gaming store. All right. I have also had them fix things for me. For example, I was given a PSP 1000 and one of the buttons was really sticking, and so he took it apart for me, cleaned it all out, and then it worked fine, which was great. One of my favorite things is that I had a super yellow Super Nintendo. Try saying that again. Super yellow Super Nintendo. You've all seen them. It was just the top of the shell, the bottom was fine, and I was actually looking for another one on Kijiji so that I could replace it because it was so yellow and kind of ugly. And it was actually becoming really brittle at the top, and it actually cracked in a couple places. So that being said, I went there, I told them about it, and they're like, oh, just bring it in and we'll just switch the shell for you. We have broken ones in the back, and that would be no charge. So I definitely took advantage of that, took it in, had them replace the shell for me, just the top half because the bottom was fine, and now my Super Nintendo looks beautiful. Tip number 4. Tip number 4 is going to be talk to other gaming people. Now, I always do this at game stores because it's the best way that you're going to find people who share like interests. Now, why I say this is because they can have extra copies of things or things that they're not so interested in, and they can actually trade or sell them to you. I have a few examples of that. I got talking to this one guy, and he actually had just scored a big Vectrex lot, and I had been looking for a second controller. And if anybody knows how hard it is when you collect Vectrex things, second controllers can be very, very expensive. So he actually had 2 Vectrexes and 3 controllers, and so he didn't need one of them. So what he did is he actually dropped them off at the gaming store that I do frequent, who give me all the free stuff, and let me choose between 2 of them. And so I was able to purchase this one from him here, and it's actually in perfect condition. It's got all the little pads on each of the 4 corners, which my original didn't. The stick is really great. Everything about it is perfect. It's actually significantly better than the one that came with my Vectrex. So that was cool there, and I wouldn't have been able to get this had I not spoken to this guy. He also sold me a Game Gear game. So this is Earthworm Jim for the Game Gear, and just by talking to him again, he is mostly a console collector and not too bothered about a lot of games, so when I told him I didn't have this one, he was able to sell that one to me. There's also another guy I talked to, and he is a huge collector in my area, and we were talking that I had just picked up a Virtual Boy, and he had an extra game for it. He had 2 copies of this one particular game, which is like 3D Tetris. This is the Japanese version, but doesn't make a difference, obviously. So he was able to sell me that one for a great price. So again, just by talking to people who frequent these stores, I was able to pick up some extra stuff to add to my collection, and at a very reasonable price. Okay, my third tip for you is how to keep track of your collection. Now, my collection is not huge, but it's starting to get hard for me to be able to remember off the top of my head what I have for each system without having to buy doubles and triples of things thinking I don't have it. And so that's when Excel, different gaming apps, and Dropbox come into this. So I actually use Excel to keep track of the systems I own, how much I paid for them and what they're worth, as well as all the games. And I use an app when I'm out on my iPad just to keep track of it, so I can quickly just look up the games that I have. I used one really good app for a couple of years, and it actually stopped working. It seemed that after an update, it couldn't update itself in the system, and I wasn't able to add manually like I used to be able to. So after I'd been using it for over a year, having stored all my collection on it, I had to switch apps. And now I'm using another one, and it's just like a game collecting app. And it's actually great. They have different ones they have the same app, but they have it for music, alcohol, all kinds of different stuff. So what I'll do is I'll show you kind of the app itself and the name of it and everything in a screenshot. Excuse me. And then the last thing I use is Dropbox. Dropbox is a great free service where you can just store a lot of files, and then you can look at them on any computer, tablet, etc. And so I used Dropbox primarily for work, but then also I use it for this, and it's a great way to share with other people and things like that. So Dropbox is a great idea to be able to pull things up on the go if you don't want your Excel files and everything like that to be on your tablets, your smartphones, or anything. You don't want to have the space taken up by them. Now we're going on to number 2. Tip number 2. We're getting towards the end here, and this is something I'm really happy about. I found these actually on another YouTube channel back in the day, and I don't remember whose channel it was, so I'm very sorry about that. But these are extension cords. So they're actually 1-foot outlet extension cords. And so you're thinking, 1 foot, what's that gonna do? But when you have all of those big power bricks, these come in handy. If you have your power bar or however your setup is done, and you have, say, like I do, you have the Sega CD, 32X, and Genesis together, that's 3 massive power bricks side by side. And how are you supposed to fit them in? You use these. I have one that's open, actually, and I got these from The Source in Canada. So you get these, and you just plug them in, and then plug them into your outlet, and they let you have just enough space to be able to have them all side by side. So they're a really great thing. I got a whole bunch of these a few months ago because they were clearing them out, and I felt that it was quite necessary for me to pick up as many as I could, just for the future and expanding kind of the systems I have and things like that. Now, my last and favorite hint for you today is going to be computer power stations. Now, I have one beside me that I just picked up last week. And so here it is. So it's hard to capture it all on camera, but what it is an old 1980s computer power station. You'd have the monitor sitting on top of this, and what you did is you have individual switches. So you have the master switch, which is on this side here, and then you have, it says things like computer, monitor, printer, auxiliary 1 and 2, and these are all individually powered, and so you don't have to have all your systems hooked up and have that kind of vampire suck that comes from it, that what is it called, vampire or ghost drainage. And so you can use these on the back. It's just has all the individual powers again, so the outlets you can plug them into. And so I actually already have 2 of these hooked up with different systems on them, and you don't have to worry ever. Once you turn the master off, there's no power going through this. It's actually an awesome surge protector as well, because back in the day you didn't want your computers to have problems like that, especially because they didn't have the surge protectors built into them like the laptops do now. And so this was definitely a fantastic idea, and you can get them. This one cost me $10 last week on Kijiji. And what I do is I actually have systems sitting on top of it. So I have 2 of these side by side, and then one has my PS4 on top and the other one has my Sega Genesis and CD. And so things like this work really well if you can find them really cheap. I've actually only come across 3 of these since I've been collecting. 2 of them I got from the same gentleman, and then this one I was just able to pick up last week. So these is definitely a cool idea, especially when you team it up with the extension cords. It makes everything very neat, organized. You can easily keep track of it. I hope you enjoyed my tips today, and take care.